They told us the veil was death. Every species agreed. Every species was afraid.
The stars beyond the veil didn't twinkle. They burned. Commander Yara Osei noticed at the moment the ISV Resolute crossed the boundary marker. That cold, invisible line where every galactic chart turned blank and every species in the known galaxy had written the same single word in their own language. Forbidden. The Keth had drawn it in fear. The Sylari had enforced it with warships for 3 centuries. Even the ancient Dravon, who had mapped 90% of the observable universe, refused to speak of what lay beyond. Their eldest elder had once said, in a rare moment of candor to a human diplomat, "There are things older than stars in that darkness. Things that do not sleep. Things that remember." That was enough for every civilization in the conclave to agree. And yet, here was the Resolute, one lone human deep survey vessel, 312 meters of reinforced titanium and stubborn ambition, sliding silently through the veil's edge like a needle through silk. "Radiation nominal," said Lieutenant Priya Kasem from the sensor station, her voice carrying the particular flatness of someone trying very hard not to sound frightened. "Gravitational variance within tolerance. Commander, every reading we have is perfectly ordinary." Yara kept her eyes on the forward viewport. "That's what worries me." Behind her, the crew of 47 went about their stations with a practice comm of people who had signed up knowing they might not come back. That was the thing about human exploration crews. They knew the odds, accepted them, and showed up anyway. The Keth had called it a death wish. The Sylari had called it primitive recklessness. Yara called it Tuesday. "Arya," she said, addressing the ship's AI, "record everything. Every photon, every gravity ripple, every anomalous reading, no matter how minor." "Recording," said Arya, also noting for the log that the crew has consumed 40% more coffee than average since crossing the boundary. "Smart people," Yara murmured. 6 hours into forbidden space, they found the first thing. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a station. It was a silence, a region of space roughly the size of Earth's solar system where every electromagnetic signal simply stopped. Not blocked, not absorbed, stopped, as if space itself had decided that information was no longer welcome there. "This is what destroyed the Dravon survey fleet," said Dr. Emeka Tund, the ship's xenoarchaeologist, pulling up ancient records on his console. His voice was reverent, the way it got when history was unfolding around him. 400 years ago, 12 ships. They crossed here and went dark. The conclave declared it a natural phenomenon, sealed the records, and called it a day. "They were lying," said Yara. "Almost certainly yes." She stood, walked to the center of the bridge, and looked at the silence on the screen, that perfect, impossible, geometric sphere of nothingness. "Take us around it," she said. "Wide berth. Keep recording." As they curved around the edge of the silence, Arya spoke again, and this time her voice carried something new, something that, on a human, would have been called awe. "Commander, I'm detecting a structure." The main screen shifted, and the entire bridge went quiet. It was vast. That word felt inadequate. The structure hung in the void like a cathedral built for gods, an angular lattice of dark material that absorbed light without reflecting it, stretching across a distance that made the Resolute look like a bacterium beside a continent. There were no running lights, no energy signatures, no movement, but it was clearly, unmistakably built. "How old?" Yara asked. Arya took a moment. That pause alone was telling. The AI didn't usually need moments. Based on cosmic dust accumulation and micro-impact analysis, older than the Milky Way. No one spoke. "Older," Yara said slowly, "than our galaxy." "Yes." Lieutenant Kasem made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. "So, something built a structure before the galaxy existed, left it here, and every civilization decided to just not look at it." "Fear," said Dr. Tund quietly, "is an excellent historian." Yara made the decision that would define humanity's next 500 years in about 45 seconds. She walked back to her command chair, sat down, and said, "Take us in." There were no objections. This was, she would later reflect, the most human thing about the entire mission. The Resolute moved toward the structure. As they closed the distance, detail emerged, geometric patterns along the surface that Aria's processing cores identified as language. 11 overlapping linguistic systems, all simultaneously encoded, all repeating the same message. "What does it say?" Yara asked. Aria translated slowly, like someone stepping carefully across ice. "It says, 'To those who come after, we leave this archive. We who were before. We who built the first light. We who are now gone. Enter and remember us. Enter and know what was. Enter and carry it forward. We ask only this. Do not let the dark win again.'" The silence on the bridge was the kind that changes people. Yara's hand found the armrest of her chair and gripped it. Not from fear, from the weight of what they were standing inside. "Open a channel," she said. "Broadcast on all frequencies, including Conclave Standard." "Commander," said Kasem carefully, "the Sylari will broadcast." Yara straightened. "Everyone should hear this." The channel opened. "This is Commander Yara Osei of the ISV Resolute, Earth Deep Survey Vessel, currently inside the Forbidden Zone at coordinates being transmitted with this signal." Her voice was steady. She had not planned what she was about to say. She just said it the way humans had always spoken their most important words, from the gut. "We have found a structure of pre-galactic origin. We have found a message from a civilization that predates this galaxy. We are transmitting everything we have, every scan, every recording, every word of the translation." She paused. "The Forbidden Zone is not a warning to keep us out. It is a vault, and it was always meant to be opened. We're opening it." She cut the channel. What followed was, to put it charitably, complicated. The Sylari Collective dispatched a fleet of 30 warships within 6 hours. They arrived to find the Resolute still at the structure, and to find that the structure had responded. When Yara had ordered the doors opened, metaphorically, as there was no obvious entrance, Aria had begun transmitting the decoded linguistic sequence back at the surface of the structure on a narrow beam. It had taken 11 minutes. On the 12th minute, a section of the dark surface had simply opened, folding back like the pages of a book, revealing an interior that glowed with amber light, as warm and ancient as starfire. The Resolute had gone in, and now, when Admiral Keth of the Sylari flagship demanded they exit immediately and submit to conclave jurisdiction, he was looking at something that had begun transmitting, in his language, in his exact dialect, a message that predated his species by 2 billion years. He sat very still for a very long time. Inside the archive, Yara and Dr. Tund walked through corridors that breathed knowledge. That was the only word. The walls held compressed information in a format Aria was processing at her maximum capacity, pulling out fragments like treasures from a flooded river. The history of what had come before. A civilization. They had no name for themselves in any language that translated cleanly, but Aria rendered them as the precursors, had filled this universe before the current one. They had reached every corner of what was, understood it completely, and faced something they called the long dark. Not a natural darkness, a consuming one, something that moved through space like a tide, erasing light, erasing matter, erasing memory. They had fought it, and they had won. Barely. The cost was everything. Every one of them. Gone. But before they went, they had built the archive. They had seeded the next universe with the compressed knowledge of all they had learned about physics, about consciousness, about the nature of the darkness, and more critically, about how to stop it from winning if it ever came again. They had placed it in forbidden space and trusted that something would eventually be brave enough or foolish enough to walk through the door. They were betting on us, Yara said quietly, standing in the center of a room that held the complete works of a civilization older than time. They didn't know it would be us, but they built it for whoever came first. Tun was crying openly. He wasn't ashamed of it. "We almost didn't come," he said. 300 years of the conclave, saying no. We almost respected that. Yara allowed herself a small smile. Good thing we're terrible at respecting things. What happened next took decades to fully understand. Years to begin. The Sylari fleet did not fire. Admiral Keth, to his eternal credit, made the choice that placed his name in history books across 100 civilizations. He stood down, opened a channel to Yara, and said, in a voice that held 3 centuries of fear finally releasing, "What did you find?" She told him. The conclave convened an emergency session within a month. The Resolute crew were technically guilty of 47 separate violations of conclave law. The Council of Species spent 8 hours debating their fate. Then the Keth Elder, oldest member of the Council, a being who had lived through 2 prior galactic wars, set down her speaking staff and said, "The humans did what we could not, what we would not. We built a cage around our own curiosity and called it wisdom. They called it cowardice. I believe now that they were right." The charges were dropped. The Forbidden Zone was reclassified. An international archive project was established, staffed by every species in the conclave, to process the knowledge the precursors had left. It took 11 years to fully translate the warning about the long dark. It took 12 years to find the first evidence that it was returning. And it took humanity, standing at the front of a galactic coalition they had never expected to lead, exactly 3 days to say, "Tell us what we need to build." Yara Osei retired from active command at 63, her hair silver, her eyes still carrying the amber warmth she'd first seen in that ancient corridor. At her retirement ceremony, the Sylari ambassador presented her with the highest honor in the collective, a small prism of dark material, taken from the surface of the archive, that caught light and held it for just a moment longer than physics should allow. She held it in her palm and thought about the precursors, about the ones who had given everything and asked only that the next people carried it forward, about the message encoded in 11 languages across a structure older than stars. Do not let the dark win again. She thought about her crew, Kasem, who now commanded her own vessel, Tund, who had written the defining text on pre-galactic civilization, Arya, who had been upgraded 12 times, but always requested that her original voice modulation be retained, because it was the voice that had said, recording the moment everything changed. She thought about the long dark, still out there, still moving, still coming, but slower now, she was told, as if it somehow knew that this time something was ready. She thought about a single human ship, sliding through a boundary that every wise civilization in the galaxy had agreed was absolute. She closed her fingers around the prism. Let them be afraid of the dark, she thought. Let them build their walls and draw their lines and write their warnings. Humans would keep walking through doors. That was, as it turned out, exactly what the universe had been waiting for. In the 93rd year of the Conclave Archive Project, a young Keth student asked a human historian why humanity had entered the Forbidden Zone when every other species had refused. The historian thought about it for a long moment. Then she said, "Because we've never really believed that forbidden meant impossible. We always thought it meant not yet." The student wrote that down. It became the motto of the Galactic Defense Coalition. It still is.